Before I open the hearing for the Barnstable Conservation Commission, I would like to ask George to do a roll call for the quorum purpose.
Abadili.
Present.
Foster.
Louise.
Present.
Gilmore present. Hearn.
Present.
Lee.
Present.
Hagney.
Present.
Sampu.
Present.
Administrator Darcy Carley.
Present.
Staff member Kim Kavanaugh.
Present.
Agent Ed Hoops.
Present.
We're all here and accounted for. Floor is yours, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Acting under the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40, and or Chapter 237 of the Code of Town of Barnstable, the Barnstable Conservation Commission will hold a public hearing on Tuesday, July the 18th, 2023, at 3 p.m. on the application of Charles M. and Janet M. Daly, Linda Sarafi, and Al Sisi Sultan, the Linda Sarafi Revocable Trust, Town of Barnstable, DPW, Gloria Gilbert. The hearing will be held remotely as televised on Channel 18. The plans and application are on file and may be reviewed by scheduling appointment by sending email requests to Darcy Curley at 230 South Street, Hyannis. This meeting is being recorded and transmitted by the Information Technology Department of the Town of Barnstable on Channel 18. Under Mass General Law, Chapter 38, Section 20, anyone else desiring to make such a recording or transmissions, please let Channel 18 or I know. Hearing none. This afternoon's hearing agenda is posted on the town's website. On the agenda, next to each application is the amount owed to the Town of Barnstable for the cost of advertisement. Please send your checks to the Conservation Division at 230 South Street before the hearing. Remote participations. The Conservation Commission public hearing will be held by remote participation as a result of an act extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency signed by the governor on March 29, 2023, suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law. Remote public access to this hearing shall be provided in the following manner. 1. The hearing will be televised via Channel 18. 2nd, real-time public comment can be addressed to the Conservation Commission utilizing the Zoom link 864-9655-2437 or use the toll-free phone number 888-475-4499 as shown on the agenda. Third, the public can also email the comment to darcy.curley@town.barnstable.ma.us at least 8 hours prior to the hearing. For your information, under the NOI, the Linda Safari and Alcisa Sisi Sultan and the Linda Safesi Revocable Trust of 2018 has requested for a continuance without testimony to August 1st, 2023. Under the new business this afternoon, we have that public and the commission's workshop regarding to the shellfish rating ID map and the 2022 shellfish rating table. This workshop is for the public comment and the commissioner's discussions. The final vote for this matter will be scheduled for a later date. The plans and the maps and the rating table are available on the conservation's websites and under the meeting materials. Commissioner, do you have any comment first, or do we want to take the public comment for now before we start discussing? Any choice? Let's go to the public and see what comment we get when they have a chance to look at the shellfish rating map and the rating table that we have. Channel 18, any public want to make any comment on this?
None that identified themselves to me.
None?
Arlene has her hand up.
Who?
Arlene has her hand up. You see her? Right in the middle of the screen?
I didn't see her hands up, but
Arlene Wilson.
yeah, I know.
Her physical hand.
Physical hand up.
Her physical hand.
I didn't see her image on the screen, so that's why I could not see it. And then I was looking at my list.
Take my word for it.
Thank you,
I
Louis.
think
Just a couple of questions, Tom. I was going through the list, and we seem to be missing North Bay segment 27. I'm not sure why, but I imagine just running down, trying to type that list, it's easy to miss one or two. There was one other, let's see, Katuitt Bay has a segment that's listed as NR, and I can't find that on the map anywhere.
okay.
And finally, the color coding on the map that you have up on the website now is different than the color coding from the map that was initially up, and which I had the GIS department print me a full-size copy because I couldn't read the numbers on the screen. By the time you blew them up enough to see them, they were so fuzzy you couldn't read them anyway. So I was wondering if indeed the maps had changed in the last couple of months since you've been having these workshops.
Since the last workshops, we have changed the rating map just to show the ID only, not the rating itself. Because from the workshops, the commissioner seems to be going in terms of separating the rating on the map, and then rather than that, doing a table showing the rating, because there was a discussions about which one is not significant or not familiar with that locations. So we separate out the rating into one is the ID map, and then second is the rating table. For the two that you mentioned, I think we have to apologize in terms of whether that is omitted by mistake or what on the NB27. I did not see on the table as well. And then the CRNR, the CBNR. That we can, put it back and then updating the table to reflect those. It's by mistake, not purposely omitting them.
Nothing nefarious going on here, right, Tom? Thank you.
Any other public comment?
None.
None?
I think John O'Day has his hand up, Tom.
I was trying to find my digital hand. I would comment for a minute if I can.
No, that's okay.
Just real quick, this has been going on for a while, so I would just kind of like to reference back to some of the initial comments that the commission got when this was first posted, I think like back in April, and so when it does get to the point of actually thinking about whether to vote on these at some future hearing, I hope that the commissioners will go back and read those. I think that one of the comments that I had, and just over the months that this has been being discussed, just seems to hit home more and more, is, we're talking about this being a presumption, and, and the amount of time we spent talking about the maps and how many people are voting and not knowing, if we could just spend some time talking about what actually would be taken into consideration to overcome these presumptions. And Pete at one of the meetings was talking about how we need 3 things or 4 things to be habitat, and man, if we could actually do surveys that meant something to know what the significance really was, what a difference that would make in our being able to present to you and you understanding what it is. The only other comment I would say is that keeping in mind in these ratings that these, I think the direction to the people voting on them was, anything within 200 feet of this area, could be out. So a significant area could be, along the intertidal, and the dock could be out 100 feet, and there could be absolutely nothing out there, but it could still be considered significant. I just don't know how that all should be interplaying, and also how there should be consideration for modifications of existing docks. If that's habitat that's been essentially written off, then how does modifying it appear within it? What sort of impact does that have? And also we had, just to remind the commission, at some point over the last couple of months, we had a pier down the very tip of Eel River. And I think that, DMF and Natural Resources and our shellfish surveyor and Pete Sampu, I think, said he was down in there himself mucking around to check the habitat. And there was nothing. And yet the shellfish rating, I think, is like a 9 or a 10. So it just, I don't know, it's hard to follow these where it's all from. And we'll stay following, but just wanted to kind of remind the commission of some of the comments they've got. We've gotten sidetracked into should it be a chart or a map or but big picture, I certainly think that there's some flaws in how we're doing this whole thing. You're doing it. I'm just a bystander.
Thanks, John. I'm sure that, that will be one of our charge when we're trying to look at the overall, comments from the consultants and how we're going to interpret the shellfish rating map. And I remember that this is way back, and then we have a lot of comments, from the consultants in terms of how we're going to use these rating maps for the piers, how we want to regulate it. And at one point we were talking about, we have to look at it and see how we want to use the data that we have on the latest rating map, how we're going to change, whether there will be a change in 703 or not, in chapter 703 or not, we don't know. But just for reminder, yes, we should go back and look at the questions or the comment from the consultants before we come back and draw conclusions on how we voted on this one. Just before I forgot is the follow-up, whether it's going to second workshop or the voting stuff would be, probably in September range, because, we have a lot of application coming in August. And the timing wise, it's not going to be good in terms of doing it in when we have let's say Park City wind coming in. That's not a good time. So just to give you a heads up. John?
John Abadili?
Yes.
Oh, thank you, Tom. Yeah, I really would like to follow up on John Lee's comments and your comments, because I brought up the issue several times. There's two separate questions. One is the rating map itself, and the biggest question is how does the commission use those? We now say if it's 6 or more, it says a rebuttable presumption of high value requires certain things. So John and Arlene and Lynn and the other consultants and experts, it would be a great help to get your comments specifically addressing the kind of issues, John, that you just raised. I mean, it would be a great help to me. What does it take? Do we continue to use the 6 or more as a rebuttable presumption? And what kind of information should the commission consider in, if there's a request to say, wait a minute, although you had a high value here or significant, it is rebuttable because we've done this, this, and this. John, is I think exactly where you were going. So any input, at least for this commissioner, from the folks that have some expertise would be really appreciated. So I think that would be great.
Yeah, I kind of like to follow up on that too, John. And John O'Day mentioned, what makes it significant? What is it? And is there a way we can actually quantify that rather than relying on somebody's opinion? So is there a way to actually quantify that, whether it be scientifically through testing or I don't know, but maybe you could address that along the way to consultants.
Just to follow up George's comment, I'm just, I know the consultant has provided those comments through an email and stuff like that. And, we may have to go and try to track it down, or whether John or Arlene can forward that email again, or whether there's any additional comment stuff. that you want to submit it and send it in so that we can kind of read it in one page and then try to, understand the whole things. Pete?
No, thank you very much, Tom, for letting me speak here. In terms of having a quantitative analysis, George, you're talking some serious marine biology there, including sediment biogeochemistry. That you're looking at a potential nightmare. What we do have is a rebuttable presumption that can go both ways, both with a high value and with a low value. This is the information we get. We get information from consultants and shellfish experts that they hire. We get information from our town shellfish biologists, experts in their field. We, as then a group, try to take this information in and balance it. Yes, it's quite possible it might be high value in the top levels of the intertidal area because of soft shell clam, and really poor once you get into subtidal. That was the Eel River site that we had just recently. But in terms of quantifying in some kind of number situation, when the habitat is changing as you go down subtidal from intertidal, is a bloody nightmare. I think having our discussion and the input that we have from varied fields of interest, I think that's the best that I don't think we're going to get better than that. That's just my professional opinion. Thank you.
Louise?
I'd like to know, excuse me, what other towns do. I think other towns talk about shellfish densities when they make decisions about piers and docks. And so what do they do? Is there something that we can learn from them? Maybe we ought to do a survey, and not just on the Cape. I mean, other places like ours in our environment. Thank you.
Darcy, do you have any feedback in terms of, the populations?
I think there aren't a lot of towns that deal with needing these maps to set depth requirements under a town bylaw. I think
they
we might be the only town doing as far as getting into that depth with our bylaw of doing the 30 inches or the 12 inches and requiring both the consultant survey and the the MEA survey.
But do they consider shellfish density in some way? I don't expect that they have a 12-inch or a 30-inch rule, but how do they evaluate the quality of the shellfish environment in making decisions? And if they do, what's their metric? If they have
maybe we can
more qualitative.
Maybe we can ask Arlene or John O'Day, since they're here.
There are several towns that set an average shellfish density and regulate pier length and the depth of water on that basis. There are lots of towns that set maximum lengths for piers, regardless of the width of the shorefront on the property. So there are all kinds of ways that towns go about it. It certainly would be easy enough to get those bylaws and take a look at them.
No, I'd like to do that, but I mean, for example, you said they take into account average shellfish density. Well, what is that? I mean, how do they determine it? Do they do? Go ahead.
Require the applicant to do a study.
Right, but what is that study, and what does it show, and how do they use it? I mean, that's what we're wrestling with right now.
The studies aren't significantly different than the way or the methodology that Barnstable asks people to use. Although Barnstable does cite a minimum amount of the shore that's supposed to be sampled. I don't believe that that's actually ever been enforced. Most of the towns look at the area around the dock rather than the entire shorefront for the property.
Thank you.
Arlene, if you can, tell us, which town or, so that we can kind of look up some information that they have as comparisons to ours and see how we go from there in terms of how we evaluated our shellfish rating for the piers. I think that would be nice to know as a comparisons.
I can certainly give Darcy a list.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
What I was mentioning is, as far as the next step where we have a map that states high shellfish and low shellfish and, taking in consideration a group of people. That's the part I was talking about. I don't know if there's any other town that does that. The rating maps.
Yeah.
Well, but maybe there's a better way of doing that than what we're doing, what we have been doing. That would be more objective rather than subjective. I have no idea, but I can't imagine that other people haven't wrestled with this idea, this question.
I mean, it sounds like the other towns use the studies that are coming in, both from the representative and MEA, and then make the decision and not have a map before to review. Just get rid of the map and the whole shellfish habitat.
In terms of what MEA and the consultants come up with, there are numbers. So what do those numbers mean? How do you interpret those? Is that good? Is it, significant, not significant, so forth?
Mm-hmm.
But that's because we have our Chapter 703 and kind of describing that significant versus non-significant, and that the other town may not have that 703 to deal with.
They definitely don't.
Yeah. So they just probably just like Arlene said, they probably just looking at the shellfish density along the pier, or maybe and see what the impact is from the MEA and maybe from the consultant results, and then go from there. So, Bill.
We know that some places are good habitat and some places are terrible habitat. But I don't know where the terrible habitat is or where the really good habitat is. And so I think that maps give us some general screening. And early in these discussions about updating them, I called for a more nuanced kind of rating. And for reasons, we're not going to do that. It takes a lot of time and effort. And I remember, I think George going, wow, why don't we get like real data? And as Pete said, the data requirements are phenomenal to really get a handle on what is good and what is bad and what is in between and whatnot. It's really hard to do that. You have harvest. Harvest can completely deplete a stock, even though the habitat is good. You have annual variation or decadal variation. I'm thinking, I think tonight or whatever, we're looking at a wall where, hey, there was sand and now there's not sand, and what happened there? And so the shoreline changes. And so saying, and grading it, fine tooth would take an immense amount of time and money. And so we have adopted this very simple way of going, is it really good or is it really bad? And I love the term rebuttable presumption. It basically says, on the face of it, we have had a bunch of experts or really knowledgeable people rate it, and they generally think it's good or it's not so good. And so we have at least a first screening. And if people don't show up and nothing has happened, no, we don't have any other data, well, we're going to go with that. And I noticed that the map basically says most places are good habitat. But but it's rebuttable. And if we have Amy Croteau and company out there, or Liz Lewis analyzing it, and we have the consultants analyzing it, we get more data, and then we as a commission can then go, okay, well, it's rebuttable. What do we think after hearing all this site-specific data? I think going in without any data at all is worse than, I think we need this data. But again, it's rebuttable, and we need more data. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Louise, your hands are still up.
No, I just wanted to say something else.
Okay.
I think our discussion is focused on the map. But if you think about the end of the process, and maybe this has to do with the fact that the map data is rebuttable, but just thinking back historically within the last 2 or 3 years, I can't recall a situation, a proposal in which we haven't all pretty much agreed that this is a good place or this is a bad place. I don't think that we've gotten into big arguments after we've gotten all the data from the consultants and MEA and looked at the map and decided, kind of massaged all that. I think we've pretty much agreed. We've had disagreements about location, is that location of the analysis relevant given where the dock is, or given the history of the dock and what's gone on over, in that area over the years. Is the proposal that we're considering going to be a problem? But I don't think that now I may eat my words, but I don't think we've had a lot, if any, cases in which we just didn't agree upon is this significant or non-significant. Now, maybe people have other perceptions of that. And so I'd like to hear about that. Thanks.
Thanks, Louise. Who else want to speak from the commissioner? But one thing, though, I just want to mention, like Pete mentioned it, we have quite an experience in terms of the MEA staff, natural resource people. And we also have the Shellfish Committee to provide the information for the survey stuff. I think that's valuable because, yes, I know Barnstable Harbor because I go there. But I don't know any other sections of the Free Bay and so forth. So having some information from those people that knowing that stretch of the watersheds is valuable as a piece of information. Like any application, we're asking for, for the consultant to provide the shellfish study, and then we also have the town biologist to provide that information. So, it's nice to have all this information in front of us to make that decisions on certain application. Is there another piece of information that we need? I think that's what we're looking for. How we can help in terms of the consultants. If it is rebuttable, what it is, what causes the rebuttable information that we need to overturn that, rating stuff. Anyone? Any more public comment too?
None.
So without this, so what I want to propose is Arlene, if you can send us those towns that have using the shellfish density wise, and then we can share them with the commission and with some data stuff. And then I'll take a look at that and then trying to schedule another one. And if people have any other comments that we want to ask the MEA ones, send us the question and then we can get some feedback because MEA is not available tonight, this afternoon to answer any questions. And so, rather than, to bring them in without any questions, I would rather to have some questions so that they can answer and provide us with those answers first and go from there. Pete?
Yeah, I'd like to just, whether it's Arlene or one of our staff, as we think, I mean, our neighbors on the Cape here in Massachusetts should be a good resource for us to check to see what they do. Pleasant Bay, so Orleans and Chatham, I would suspect, deal with docks and its relationship to shellfish. Falmouth, I also think might have that. What we have is we've got both north and south side of the Cape. So we are dealing with fairly different environmental conditions, especially with respect to tidal height. So getting a similar town here on the Cape with such varied habitat and environmental conditions, that's where I think it would be the most valuable for us to check what are these other towns doing. Again, Orleans, Chatham, possibly Falmouth, but Falmouth is a long history of development on their shoreline. It is pretty much all a same kind of tidal interaction. So I would have us look primarily at Chatham and Orleans. I don't think Dennis would be a good comparison, and neither would I think Yarmouth. They just don't have what we have in terms of embayments and north side, south side. Thank you.
Thanks, Pete. Louise?
Well, I mean, just responding to what Pete said, I think, you know, the challenge that we have is getting one step further down the road than where we are in terms of the shellfish rating, because that has to do with what kind of regs do you develop? How do you develop the regs that covers all that? I think what we're wrestling with is how do you characterize what the shellfish habitat and population is to begin with, and then you take that and build some regs around it. So I wouldn't discard any of the towns on the Cape, and I would also look at, you know, Marion, Mattapoisett, Ipswich. If, you know, what do they do? It's totally different, but how do they evaluate what they've got? Thanks.
Thanks, Louise. Any more comment from the commissioner before I close the workshops? None? Let me try one more round on the public, you know, or the consultants. Any comments before I close the workshops? None? So I'm closing the workshop right now, and then we'll get the questions and get some more information to the commissioner. And we'll make a determination. I'll make a determination when we'll come back for the next shellfish discussions on the workshop with the commissions and the public and the consultant too. So thank you. The next item on the agenda is a revised plans, 299 Eel River Road Realty Trust, SE3-6044. That's John.
It is. Good afternoon, John O'Day from Sullivan Engineering Consulting. I can bring up a plan for you. This was to refresh you. This was a vacant parcel, or just had a tennis court on it. The commission approved a house and a pool cabana. Our resource primarily here was a coastal bank with a work limit established at the 50-foot buffer. So the 100-foot buffer ended, you know, really kind of below the patio and cabana area. The couple of changes that we're looking at are bumping up the size of the cabana a little bit on the landward side. So that's out of the 100-foot buffer. We're still in the jurisdiction of the flood zone or state bank, but outside of the buffer zone, and then looking to create a little shed area outside of the 50-foot buffer in an area that was approved as lawn. They had originally thought that they'd be able to have some basement underneath the pool cabana where they could be storing the beach chairs and the life jackets and the pool patio furniture and stuff, but that was in the flood zone, so they couldn't do that. So this is kind of being proposed as a as a shed, what anyone would do with the shed. And so with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
So that's just a shed for any chairs, that sort of thing, not for the fuel, gasoline, that sort of thing.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. Question from the commissioner. Anyone? None?
John Abadili has his hand up.
John?
Thank you, Tom. John, is there any way to move that further back, giving up lawn within the 50 to 100 for hardscape shed? I'm just wondering, and I understand that this is a full 0 to 50, but I'm wondering if there's any way to relook at this and move that shed further back from that. And I would agree that if it's approved, we certainly put a condition relative to storage of flammables, liquids, those kinds of things. So I'm just wondering, John, if you took a look at this, is there any other way that you can move this a little bit further out of that 50 to 100?
You know, as far as I know, this is just going to be constructed on posts. I don't think we're really doing any digging. I think we tried to maintain room around the 50-foot to actually be able to do it and maintain it. As we start pulling back, if I pull that plan back up, you know, it's sort of tucked into a nice little corner back here that's out of everyone's sight. As we start pulling it back, it actually maybe gets, you know, closer to both our and the neighbors' buildings. Seemed to be in a nice little hollow that it wasn't going to impact anybody.
Is there a way then to design this so that it is not in the ground, it is elevated? I don't know if you need downspouts on it or some kind of water system. I'm just trying to come up with an idea as to how to kind of minimize more hardscape in the 50 to 100. That's all. That's what I was stretching it to look at.
I think that we could certainly look at having, you know, a drip edge or downspouts and having it be on sonotubes so that there isn't any digging. I think that also just sort of keep in mind, well, let me draw on here. I don't know if you can see the 100-foot buffer on this property.
Yeah.
There's probably like 100 square feet of development total within it, you know, just that corner of the pool. So in terms of developed buffer zones, this is probably the least developed buffer on all of the harbors around here. But we can certainly deal with our roof. We can deal with our you know, having it elevated. I think that would all be acceptable.
Yeah, I think the point you made about the amount of hardscape not within the 50 to 100 is a valid point. So whatever you can do, I think would be great, and I would support it.
Oh, John, can you do the, I mean, this is John O'Day. John, can you do the 12 by 16 on the sonotubes?
I think we can. So I think that we could have a revised plan that says, you know, on sonotubes and, you know, provide a note about the roof runoff.
Drip edge, yeah. Okay. Any other question from the commissioner? Seeing none, could I have a motion to approve a revised plan showing the proposed shed in the sonotubes with a drip edge for the runoff, for the roof runoff?
Tom, excuse me, a condition for, I'm sorry, a condition relative to storage within the shed that you brought up?
Yes. So no fuel storage, just for the equipment, just for the chair storage and that sort of thing.
No,
Excuse me, can we have that as a note on the plan? Because it's very difficult to condition a revised plan. So can, John, you add that as a note on the plan itself? Thank you.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Abadili?
Aye.
Foster?
Aye.
Gilmore, aye. Hearn?
Aye.
Lee?
Aye.
Tangny,
Aye.
Sampu,
Aye.
unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have 4 certificate of compliance. The first 2 is the easy. So I'm going with the first 2 first. The first one is Timothy McAuliffe, SE3-5800, Diane L. Curry, SE3-5584. Could I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Sampu,
Aye.
Tangny,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Hearn,
Aye.
Gilmore, aye. Foster,
Aye.
Abadili.
Aye.
That's unanimous.
Thank you. For the next 2 certificate of compliance, there is some conditions that need to be mentioned as an ongoing conditions. The first one is the Oyster Harbor Club's SE3-5449 is to maintain the metal mitigation area as an ongoing conditions. And the second, Oyster Harbor Club SE3-5711 is to maintain the split rail fence as the demarcations, and that need to be in ongoing conditions. Could I have a motion to approve those 2 certificate of compliance?
With those conditions.
Correct.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Lee,
Aye.
Tangny,
Aye.
Abadili,
Aye.
Foster,
Aye.
Sampu,
Aye.
Hearn,
Aye.
Gilmore, aye. That's unanimous.
Thank you. We have 3 enforcement order. The first one is William J. and Catherine N. Fitzgerald, 285 Baxanack Road, Marston's Mill, map 075, parcel 010.002, alteration of the 50-foot buffer to a wetland resource area, coastal bank, town, by cutting, clearing, vegetation, installing and maintaining lawn, and failure to comply with ongoing conditions of the certificate of compliance. This is SE3-2973. Ed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just to give you an idea where we are, it's Baxanack Road up on the top of the screen. What we had, this is an issue where we had a series of violations before the current homeowner took possession of the property. So Mr. Fitzgerald bought the property about 2 years ago. There had been a series, and I suppose you may remember this, it's been a particularly difficult property with the former owner doing a lot of manipulation of the 50-foot buffer in this area over a course of 7 or 8 or 9 years back in the early 2000s. Mr. Fitzgerald actually bought the property again, as I said, 2 years ago. He was unaware of any of the former violations or anything. So what he thought is he was buying a property with a big backyard, when in fact there was supposed to be a lot of buffer zone plantings in the 0 to 50. You can see on the right here what the backyard looks like now. It's just a managed lawn throughout. In terms of the certificate of compliance from SE3-2973, special condition number 7 specifically say that there shall be no disturbance of the site, including cutting of vegetation beyond the work limit. The restriction shall continue over time. It's very hard to read this plan, but the plan of record shows the work limit line is this red, this rather red line here. It's about a couple feet off of away from the pool. From the pool area. As I said, Mr. Fitzgerald has not done any clearing and not done any violation of the Wetlands Protection Act. It was all done by the former owner. He has been very good about working with us thus far. He was already starting to work on a new plan because they're going to be doing some more, looking for a new application to do a little bit more of an addition, I think, in the future. But he has been very good about putting together a plan. I've seen a preliminary plan already, and it's already looking far better than what has been there in the 2 or 3 times that the buffer had been cleared by the previous owner. So we're working together. He's going to be making a really nice restoration planting plan. We have that due by the middle of September. Like I said, they are trying to work on another project, permitting another project. So there may be a little bit of time, but we'll try and work with the Fitzgeralds to get the restoration done as quickly as possible. Part of it may stretch out into early spring next year, but they are on track for restoring that 50-foot buffer. And what I've seen with the plans so far looks very, very nice. So I think that's going to be a benefit. And I think John O'Day is representing the Fitzgeralds.
Yes, John O'Day, engineering. I'm here. Also, the property owner, Bill Fitzgerald, is here. I saw Mike Kutu from Sudbury Design. So just, I think Ed stated it very well. They walked into a mess. The project that we're working on is really simple. You'll see it soon. The pool and the spa are basically leaking. So we're kind of almost doing a replacement project. Brought this into Ed, and Bill is here, and he's committed to, fixing the wrongs of the priors and all continuing to move forward together. Bill, if you had anything else you wanted to add to the commission.
Thank you, John, and thank you for Fitzgerald for working with Ed on this project. So, any question from the commissioner? John.
Just for the record, I happen to be a neighbor of Mr. Fitzgerald, although we have not met. I do live on Baxter Neck, but I'm not in a butter or have any financial interest in it, Mr. Fitzgerald, as you know. So welcome to the neighborhood, sir. It's good to have you here.
Appreciate that, and appreciate all the effort and time your whole team has put in to help us here. We definitely want to work with you and put together a good plan that's acceptable to everybody.
Thank you. Could I have a motion to approve the enforcement order as written?
So moved.
Roll call.
Abadili.
Aye.
Dempu.
Aye.
Angie.
Aye.
Foster.
Aye.
Lee.
Aye.
Byrne.
Aye.
Gilmore, aye. That's unanimous.
Thank you. Good luck.
Thank you very much.
The second enforcement order is Christopher L. Shaw and Timothy G. Johnson, 1504 Main Street, Route 6A, West Barnstable, map 197, parcel 014, alterations of buffer to a wetland resource area, vegetated wetland by cutting and clearing vegetations. Ed.
Mr. Chairman, again, to give you perspective, this property is up actually right next to the Bogarel Sanctuary, the BLT headquarters up on the Route 6A. Just to give you some perspective, so BLT trails are running along this side of the parcel and then down through here and around. This is the subject area. You can see this red line sort of gives an approximate, very approximate location of the wetland area that we're talking about. And this is what the property looked like back in September of last year. So again, before, and you can see that there is a large area that has been cleared. This was mostly just very invasive bush honeysuckle, a little bit of grapevine and other invasives. There was a lot of invasives throughout that entire area. A few smaller trees that were cut as well. Mr. Shaw, Mr. Johnson they are actually working and are doing some pollinator issues or pollinator workshops for children with BLT over at the Fuller Farm. And, what they had hoped to do is to create a new pollinator area in their backyard as well. So that was the goal behind this. They are not they have not been doing anything in terms of converting it to lawn or anything like that. It's just it's a pollinator meadow is what they were looking to do. And again, you can see this was just later last month, about a month ago. The area is starting to grow in with some of the seeded pollinator plants. You can see this is pretty much what the area looked like before. It was just very invasive bush honeysuckle, bittersweet, some alder in there, and vines and things. So it was a very scrubby, brushy area. And again, the idea here is that they were aiming for a pollinator garden to be developed over time. So they have been both very, very cooperative with me. They responded right away when we had asked them about what was going on and explained everything up front. They will be, as part of the enforcement order, they'll be submitting a restoration planting plan. And we will continue to fill in. I've asked them to add some trees and shrubs back into the planted area as well. They're going to be working on all of that and working toward restoration. Hopefully most of it will be done by the fall, but I might linger into spring as well. That's about all I have. I do know that I believe they've hired the SC to help with the restoration plan. So that's all I have.
Is that from Christopher?
Yeah, Chris. I think both Chris and Tim are both here.
Hey, Chris or Tim, you want to say anything, or you understand what we're asking for the enforcement order?
I think you're muted, Tim.
There, okay?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Good. It was a mistake, not in judgment, but of knowledge on my part. I'm a passionate natural scientist, just a layman, retired, trying to do my best to help educate children about nature and preservation, and have joined with Barnstable Land Trust to work on those projects. I didn't know the buffer zone that I infringed on by mistake. Had to do with what we could do with the property land and its invasive species. I thought it had to do with building, because I had done a survey to see if I could build behind my house and realized it would be too close to the wetland buffer zone, but I didn't know that would also go to plants. So Ed came out, outlined for me what would be required to comply again. And we're more than happy to work with Ed and figure out a way to go back to meeting the guidelines of wetlands. And we apologize. It was an oversight and certainly nothing malicious. Didn't want a lawn. The wildflower garden, I'm looking out there now. The meadow is about this tall now. It's beginning to bloom. I've gone through for hours and done weeding of all the invasive plants to keep it healthy. And I've had the BLT land management person, Kelly, come over and advise me some more, find some more invasive things. And so we'll come up with that plan for your approval and monitor. I'm journaling now as to just how it's evolving out there. I'm taking meticulous care in documenting the activity out there, and hopefully that can be helpful to others in the community.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you for working with Ed. I think, you know, in the retirement, we all working in the backyard and all that stuff, and trying to understand all these regulations from the Concom is another, you know, aspect of, you know, understanding. And so it's you know, especially when people trying to move to the Cape and understand these regulations.
I was going to suggest to the commission that being a new landowner, Christopher and I bought the house a year ago, and we have full respect of its history and its property. But it would be great had we received in our documents of the house sale and the town tax system and all that, a little brochure about wetlands, because we just didn't know what a gold mine was out there and how to protect it. I bet a lot of people don't know. I'd be happy to help you with that.
Thank you. We probably have to look at that and then trying to get some more information out there for, you know, for the new residents to the town. Thank you. Any questions for Ed on this?
Yeah, I have a question. Bill. I doubt it has anything to do with property, given that he is such a steward of his land. However, I'm just wondering, when we allow mowing once a year, I get that that's in order to take down little trees in order to maintain a meadow. But as I'm sitting here, I'm thinking, gee, you know, if you ended up doing that mow in like November, you'd end up killing all the growth, and you'd have the, you know, you wouldn't have the filter capacity of the meadow to protect the wetland. Do we have some kind of time when that annual mow should happen, like a restriction where don't mow in like October, November, or how does that work?
Actually, recommended for best manager practice for mowing meadows is to mow usually October, November, but it's usually September, October. Most people end up doing meadow mowing.
But doesn't that then just end up where you end up having a, if you will, you know, mowed, denuded kind of a situation where the runoff can then like be running across the yard through that thing? Do you know what I mean? The meadow is there to filter, and it seems like defeating that for like many months. Whereas I thought the reason to cut it was basically because you don't want to have shrubs, you don't want to have little cherries and whatever growing up in there, and you're trying to maintain just you know, perennial grasses and stuff.
And no, the invasive management is one aspect of mowing while you mow, but the more important aspect is to promote growth by cutting. And again, you're not cutting like a lawn. You're cutting, generally speaking, you cut no less than 6 inches. So there's still a significant amount of stalk and vegetation that's left there. In this particular site, it's very flat either way, so you're probably not going to get a lot of runoff either way. But certainly the 6 inches is the standard for mowing, done in the fall typically. And again, part of it is for invasives, but it's more so to promote new growth the following year.
If it's 6 inches, I mean, no big deal then, I guess. Yeah. I was imagining, you know, it's being shorn really short or something. I mean, that might happen. So anyway, thank you.
No, 6 inches is a good height to keep, you know, any runoff to prevent that. So that's good.
Do we say that? Do people, the landowners, know you when you're doing your annual mow in October or whatever, that it should be held at like 6 inches? Is that something that owners?
I usually put that in the conditions.
Okay. Arlene's got her hand up, Tom.
Arlene.
The other reason that you mow in the fall and not in the spring or early summer is actually ground nesting birds, Bill. So you don't want to disturb that habitat when the birds are nesting and fledging.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Thank you. Could I have a motion to approve the enforcement order as written?
So moved.
I'll second.
Abadili.
Aye.
Foster.
Aye.
Gilmore, aye. Hearn.
Aye.
Lee.
Aye.
Agney.
Aye.
Sampu.
Aye.
That's unanimous.
Thank you. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you very much.
Yep. The last enforcement order, Amy B. Koff and Karen R. Gilbert, 41 Highview Circle, Marston's Mill, map 030, parcel 079, alteration of a wetland resource area, inland bank, and in 50-foot buffer by cutting, pruning vegetation for view shed without a permit. Ed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This just the area. This is Long Pond and Marston's Mills, toward the north end of the pond. This is the area that has been cut. The area itself has been cut for many years. The current homeowners bought the property back in, I think it was 2016 or 18. And they have, at the time when they bought it, again, the area was clearly cut significantly. They continued to cut it, thinking that that was perfectly okay. The problem ran in when the homeowner decided it would be easier to use chainsaws to do it, and the chainsaw sort of gave them away, and had complaints from the neighborhood. So anyhow, Karen and Amy have actually have no issues with the enforcement order. They simply just did not understand. They thought they were just allowed to do that because it had always been the view had always been as such. And so they've agreed to the enforcement order without contest, and all we're asking is that they stop cutting of vegetation within that 50-foot buffer to the inland bank or on the inland bank itself, and that the cut vegetation be allowed to grow back naturally. They are hoping to come before the commission later on with an RDA to do a vista pruning permit. However, the one thing that I would ask is that there be some sort of stipulation where they are required to let the vegetation grow back naturally for at least a year, so they can get a better assessment as to how much vegetation needs to be cut in order to meet the vista pruning guidelines that we have. So other than that, that's all we have.
Thanks, Ed. Any question for Ed on this?
Tom.
Who's that?
Tom.
Who's that?
John.
John.
Yeah, again, just for the record, I am a patient of Dr. Amy Beth Koff, but I have no financial interests or other concerns, just for the record.
Thanks, John. Any other question from the commissioners? None. Could I have a motion to approve the enforcement order as written?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Sampu.
Aye.
Agney.
Aye.
Lee.
Aye.
Hearn.
Aye.
Gilmore, aye. Foster.
Aye.
Abadili.
Aye.
That's unanimous.
Thank you. Thanks, Ed. We have 4 NOI this afternoon. The first one is Charles M. and Janet M. Daly to repair or replace the existing permitted timber bulkhead at 280 North Bay Road, Barnstable, as shown on the assessors map 072, parcel 007. John.
You got me this afternoon.
Oh, Chuck.
Let's see here. I'm going to pull up the.
We have emailed with John, and then now you Chuck show up, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's a pretty small office here. So I'll just keep these photos up here while I go through the narrative real quick. The project site consists of about 0.7 acres of land in Osterville on Oyster Harbors abutting Katuitt Bay. The property is developed with a single-family dwelling, garage, deck, timber bulkhead, as well as an extension, stairs down the bank, and associated appurtenances. The wetland resources at the site are land under ocean, coastal beach, coastal bank, and land subject to coastal storm flowage. The project as proposed is to repair or replace the existing permitted timber bulkhead. And I just want to state that both the older timber bulkhead was permitted under SC3 1954, and the extension was permitted under SC3-5060. So since the construction of the timber bulkhead and the extension, the beach has eroded 2 to 3 feet, and the beach has become steeper. The bottom of the bulkhead has become exposed and caused erosion behind the timber bulkhead. Without repair or replacement of the bank, sediment will continue to wash out from behind the wall and lead to failure of the wall and partial collapse of the bank. So this is a photo of the bulkhead in 2013, the extension, and this is earlier this spring. And then this shed, as you can see, is on grade with some vegetation. And this is that shed today. Obviously, we have to plan our tides for when we survey because it's underwater. And then, so this is the scope of the project. It's the overall plan, as well as a detailed plan right here. About 165 feet of wall repair replacement. We're requesting that construction access be to the north to avoid the shellfish grant. So work skiffs would be coming in to the north, delivering construction material to make it easier for the construction. And then I think a previous order called for a deck here to be in the stair area to be removed, which we can do if the stairs get replaced at some point in the future. But I don't think that has bearing on this filing at all. And lastly, we request an order, special condition be put in the order, conditions for a pre-construction meeting, construction protocol, and exactly how the contractor is going to approach the repair or replacement. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions the commissioners might have.
So Chuck, before I open up for the commission, there's a couple of things I just want to point out. Your SE3 5060 has not been closed out. So, we need to close that out. Even though we approve this project, you may need to start the process of filing and closing that order of conditions. And secondly, like you said, this application is only for the bulkhead, nothing to do with the stair replacement and so forth, even though your drawing saying that it will be replaced, but it will be not in this part of this order conditions.
We can take that note off the plan.
Yeah. And take out the landing too, if you're doing that. That's what the previous order of condition is. Any other questions from the commissioner, Bill?
I don't have really a problem with the project, but I was curious about the change in the beach, the erosion. The picture says that when the 2013 photo says newly installed wall and you got all this sand. And you look at the 2005 photo, and it's really kind of fuzzy, at least the copy I got, and it looked kind of gravelly. And I'm wondering, you wouldn't put sand at the base of the wall when you get done constructing it, would you? Was that like a natural sand there? That's just.
So part of the construction is they infilled behind the bulkhead, and then I believe that this is just either leftover fill or it was there in the sand, and then as the sand eroded, probably from years and years and years of people just using the beach, there was debris on the beach. I don't think that was any construction. Things got washed up. I don't think that was construction debris or littering on my client's part. If that's what you're asking.
Well, I guess I was just more interested in how you went from a beachy, sandy area to a really eroded, and even the grade looks like it's gone down.
Oh, significantly, 2 to 3 feet in places. And
that's not just beach use. There's something going on right there in terms of wave action, current, and whatnot. I think the project's great, but I found that weird how it really changed like that.
I don't think it's man-made.
Yeah, no, I don't think so either.
John?
Yes, thank you, Tom. I thought you were going to read this, but we received a suggestion from the Natural Resources in which I believe that Liz asked for 4 conditions. One of them was to include Mr. Giargiello in the pre-hearing conference or on-site conference. I think the second one was the site selection for where the barge would be located. Third one was that shellfish would be impacted by the landing of the barge and therefore should be removed and replaced. And the fourth one was that the barge be safe to certain access points throughout the duration of the project. And I think all 4 conditions made a lot of sense to me, and I would suggest that they be included in the in an order if we issue one.
I agree.
John, I just want to rebut in terms of the Contuit Oyster company to involve with the pre-construction meeting. I think that we should leave it with the engineer to coordinate the information to them as far as, how is this project to be constructed. In the past, we have not really involving a third party into this kind of pre-construction meeting. It basically is for the town staff, the natural resource, and the project engineer and the contractor.
Well, that would make sense, Tom, if I can respond to that. But my understanding is because of the closeness of Contuit Oyster to this thing, there's a unique interest of potential impact. So perhaps at least that the notice of that on-site meeting would take place. And if Chris wanted to attend, he should be allowed to attend. I'm not sure I understand the negative of having Contuit Oyster in this meeting only because of its proximity to them.
Okay.
Pete? My thought.
Well, John said everything plus some excellent advice that I was going to mention. Our shellfish biology recommendations, I think were very good. Thank you.
George?
Yeah, agree with all that. And I also agree that Mr. Giargiello, or you, Mr. Abadili,
thank you, sir. Thank you.
Should be included, I think so too, Tom. And in the answer to Bill, this shoreline, Bill, is unbelievable. The changes through the years to this shoreline for some reason, and it's hard to figure why. But the amount of material that is eroded off this shoreline is unbelievable. And we've seen it all just this one particular shoreline has really caught the brunt of it. So don't know why, but thank you.
Thanks, George. Louise?
I was there on Wednesday, and we had some rain previously. I don't remember if it was Tuesday or not. But looking down from above, it almost looked like there was suspended silt in the water next to the shoreline, almost as if erosion had taken place and it still had not settled out. So I think that there's some urgency given the high value of the shellfish area right there. Some urgency to get that erosion contained with an improved bulkhead. Thank you.
Thank you, Louise. Darcy went out to the site and make some observations, so I should let Darcy mention what he saw.
Thank you, Tom. Yeah, I did talk to John about this. I was recommending that we get a plan revision because under the ongoing condition from the SE3 1954, that landing shouldn't be there, and we have to have it removed that the existing stairs to be rebuilt is taken off the plan. But I did notice, it seemed like when I was standing on the landing that shouldn't be there and looking straight up the bank, there is an area where water is coming definitely over in that area. I can't remember if it's exactly, there were two sections of the timber wall at the top might not be joined anymore. I don't know if it's getting around that point. And then all the way over on this, closer to the southerly property line, there's a bench and the lawn goes right over the edge of the bank. This might have been something that existed all along, but it might, if the property owner's spending this much to fix the retaining wall, they might want to have a buffer planted where that bench is. You can definitely see, and I sent a picture to John, how it's just cascading over that lawn area and going down over the bank. So some of that, what Louise saw, might be what's blowing out. You know, she saw the sand after or the sediment after water came off of that lawn.
Thanks, Darcy. Chuck, if you're doing the revised plan, you may want to show that the planting that Darcy was talking about, trying to protect your erosions from that on your drawing. I think everyone would agree that would be helpful to your erosion problem. Couple of things I just want to mention. One, we talk about at the pre-construction meeting, and that will be with the conservation agent, the project engineer, the contractor, the shellfish biologist, and the contour oyster company. The second one is the work protocol that need to prepare 4 weeks prior to the pre-construction meeting and to be prepared by the contractor. And then the third one is you should establish a work limit line on the before the bulkhead, so that would be the access for your equipment. For the tractor to move the equipment and so forth. That's important. That would be on the revised plan. And then the next one would be the material should not be stockpiled in the intertidal zone if deemed suitable habitat for the shellfish by the shellfish biologist. So, and that kind of like, if they have to remove, you cannot stockpile there. And then if this is part of that MEA's natural resource condition, if there's any shellfish in the access point that you need to remove and replanting, and then the cost will be paid by the owner. And then the other one is the work performed from a barge ensure the mid-tide rising to mid-tide falling, or as otherwise necessary to provide a minimum of 12-inch of clearance of the work barge above the substrate. When not in use, barge shall be berthed offshore as necessary to maintain a minimum of 12 inches of clearance at all times. Temporarily landing for work performed on the shore may be allowed. So those are the conditions that I have for this.
Excuse me, Tom?
Yep.
Can I just make a suggestion on one of them? As far as the plan revision goes, I understand that we want to be able to issue the order. And if we need to have the work limit lines staked on the beach area, that's better to come in with the written protocol from the contractor, because Chuck's not going to know who was awarded this, and they might be using different equipment or So I'm okay with the work limit to come in as a hand drawing on the engineering plan, but it has to be staked prior to our pre-construction meeting.
Okay. I think those conditions that I would hit there. Is there any comment on those conditions? Louise?
What's going to keep the system from running, from the same thing happening again? You're replacing the bulkhead in the same design than that what you have now, but it's now running out. Everything's running out from the bottom. You're making it deeper. What are you doing differently?
The exact details have not been figured out. This is kind of generally to permit the either repair or replacement, but yeah, it's just to make a bulkhead deeper so that way to buy some more time. Hopefully, in nature kind of finds equilibrium and stops eroding at quite the rate it's at.
But I mean that seems to me to be really key because
and then
you've got a bad situation here, and you don't want to just repeat.
I totally agree. So that's part of the reason why we want to have the pre-construction meeting, so that way we can iron out, make sure the town, you guys know what exactly is happening when we before we perform the work.
But that really has to do with protocol, not so much design, right? Aren't we supposed to be considering design at this point?
So we're just either repairing or replacing the existing timber bulkhead. But I mean, if you're talking about the erosion, we are not. This filing is not to address the erosion.
Well, I would think it is. I mean, why isn't it? Basic, it seems to me, in terms of justification for doing this. There's a huge amount of material on the landward side of that bulkhead that has gone, and has gone into the resource area, into valuable shellfish habitat.
So that is something that will be addressed as part of this filing, is that we're going to be fixing that, so that way it does not, the bank does not run into the habitat anymore as putting in a new bulkhead. But in terms of the area eroding, I mean, that's a massive undertaking. That is totally different from what we are proposing here. To try to mitigate erosion would, I don't even know how to begin to figure out how to mitigate that.
Well, I thought that's what we've been talking about all along. This whole conversation was about the erosion.
It's trying to fix to protect the property from the erosion, but this project is not to stop the erosion. Stop the erosion, you would have to put in coastal engineered structures. You would have constant maintenance to fill with sand nourishment. At that point, you would be running into issues with state and federal requirements, and then least of which you would be filling the shellfish habitat. And the shellfish, there would be so many conflicting parties. I don't. That's just not, and at least of which the cost of that project would be astronomical.
Well, maybe we're talking about two different things, but I would like to see the design of that bulkhead to be such that there is not continued erosion from behind it into the resource area. Is that what you're talking about?
So, yeah, we have a few different options here of what we want to do, but essentially we're going to be either band-aiding or replacing the bulkhead, and no matter what option they go with, it will not be eroding from behind the bulkhead.
Okay, that's what I'm talking about. What were you talking about?
I thought you were asking about the erosion in front of the bulkhead.
No.
The other thing on the construction protocol too, because the contractor have a chance to look at that and assess the site conditions and make some adjustments. That will be part of the construction protocol to make changes in terms of your final designs for your bulkhead.
Adjustments, but in my question was, what is different, what is being done in the basic design of this bulkhead that is going to keep the material from behind it to go into the resource area? And
so right now the bulkhead has been undermined, so a lot of the soil has been running underneath here.
Yeah.
And so you know, with repairing the bulkhead, it will not be doing that anymore. All the voids will be filled with
right. But what's going to keep it? What are you doing differently that is going to keep that situation from developing again?
It's going deeper.
Question.
It's going deeper.
Okay. How much deeper?
So if they decided to go with this full replacement, we called for 16-foot vinyl sheets that have about 6 or 8 foot of exposure. So that's like 8 feet deep.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Depending on the location. Yeah, depending on the locations, you know, on the drawing, it's just showing 3 options. So depending on how serious is the erosions, and then they just have to pick which one, or the contractor can decide what is the best option for them to do. Was Bill, did you raise your hand?
I did not, no.
Okay.
Tom, I just want to point out, I think if they had something up I don't think anybody can deny there's sheet flow coming off of that lawn. But if it just seems to make sense if you add some plants to suck up some of the water that's getting around or is not even being addressed with part of that timber wall, that it would do a lot of good. There's runoff coming off of that lawn. But it seems weird to be designing something and not address something that's so easy at the top. But I know it's not part of this project, but I don't know if Chuck walked that and saw this places that it's clearly coming over the top of the lawn.
What I mentioned though at that time when you said it is I asking Chuck and see whether he want on the revised plan, whether he want to show the planting in that top of the bank there to minimize the runoff. So I don't know how extensive of the planting would be on top of the bank, and he has to go and take a look.
Yeah.
Is it okay, Chuck?
I will make sure I bring up to my client about putting plants at the top of the bank. I don't have authorization to do that, but obviously.
But this is to their best interest in terms of to minimize the runoff from the top to cause the erosions to the bottom. I mean,
yeah,
if he's spending that much money to protect that bulkhead, he should protect the bulkhead as well. So, 10:18. Any public comment on this?
Seeing none.
None. Could I have a motion to approve this project subject to receipt of a revised plan removing the landing and those special conditions I just mentioned about the pre-construction meetings and the work limit line to be staked out and the material not to be stockpiled in the intertidal zone area, and the work performed from the barge and the shellfish removal and the planting if required. So
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Abadili.
Aye.
Foster.
Aye.
Gilmore, aye. Hearn.
Aye.
Lee.
Aye.
Agney.
Aye.
Zampo.
Aye.
That's unanimous.
Thank you. Good luck, John.
Thank you very much.
The second NOI is Linda's Sarifi and Al-Sisi, Sultans, the Linda Al-Sisi, remove revocable trust of 2018 SE3-6610 has request for a continuance to August the 1st without testimony. Could I have a motion to continue these applications without testimony to August the 1st?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Abadili.
Aye.
Foster.
Aye.
Hearn.
Aye.
Zampo.
Aye.
Agney.
Aye.
Lee.
Aye.
Gilmore, aye. That's unanimous.
Thank you. The next NOI is Tana Barnstable, DPW, to deploy approximately 500 square feet of rolling treatment wetlands in Long Pond for the purpose of removing phosphorus from the ponds to reduce the occurrence of cyanobacteria blooms in Long Pond. Marston's Mill, as shown on the Assessors Map 029, Parcel 008. Amber, welcome.
Thank you, Chairman Lee and Commissioners. Pleasure to be here tonight. I've prepared some slides that I'm going to share so that I can walk through this project with you all. Everyone able to see the screen?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Yeah, so tonight just here to present the notice of intent for the Long Pond Floating Treatment Wetland Pilot Study. I'm Amber Unruh. I work at the Department of Public Works, Senior Project Manager for Special Projects in the town of Barnstable. The reason for this project in Long Pond, Marston's Mills, is essentially to study the effectiveness of phosphorus removal by floating treatment wetlands. Part of the reason why we're doing this project is because Long Pond, for the past several years, has experienced cyanobacteria blooms basically annually for at least the last 5 years and probably even prior to that. In 2021, the town commissioned a study on Long Pond to evaluate the sources of phosphorus, and nutrients coming into the pond and determine what those loads were and how they were impacting Long Pond's water quality, given the history of the cyanobacteria blooms. What that study found, in summary, it's a very long report. It is available on the town's website. We gave a presentation on it last fall as well, if anyone's interested. But essentially, it found that phosphorus is the nutrient that needs to be managed to help improve water quality in Long Pond, and that the sources of phosphorus that were contributing to the excessive amount of phosphorus in the pond were largely from septic systems within the contributing watershed, and that's generally within 300 feet of the pond boundary. There was also significant contribution from natural atmospheric deposition onto the pond surface, but this is not a controllable load, and there was some runoff from overland runoff, just in general hard surfaces or natural surfaces around the pond that can contribute to the pond. So in the long term, management of the septic systems is proposed through the town's comprehensive wastewater management plan, the CWMP. Currently, that project is in phase 1 and implementing a lot of the infrastructure that needs to be put in the ground before we can even reach the homes in Long Pond that are contributing phosphorus to the Long Pond. So those homes are proposed in phase 3 of the comprehensive wastewater management plan. It'll take us quite some time to get there. So in the meantime, we're looking for other opportunities to improve the water quality in Long Pond. One that we we researched to date is the floating treatment wetlands. The reason why we're interested in floating treatment wetlands for improving water quality in Long Pond is because we know that plants are really good at assimilating nutrients, particularly phosphorus, into their plant biomass through their roots, which, if you want to, you can harvest it later and permanently remove that phosphorus from the pond. This is just a schematic of what a floating treatment wetland would look like. You basically from some vendor purchase a media. It's generally made of some type of recycled plastic material. It floats at the water surface, and then you plant that media with plants so that the plant's roots will go down into the water, interacting with the water column and absorbing nutrients. And then on the surface, you see hopefully beautiful plants at the water surface. The reason why we're calling this a pilot study is because when you look into the literature of what a floating treatment wetland might do in terms of phosphorus removal, it's not very consistent in terms of the results. There's some literature that claims up to 1.8 kilograms of phosphorus per 100 square feet of floating treatment wetlands could be removed. Conversely, there are studies that show much less. And so what I have deduced looking into the literature is that the environmental conditions in which floating treatment wetlands are deployed and then studied often vary widely. And so if you're really going to hone in on how much phosphorus floating treatment wetlands can remove in Long Pond, you need to pilot it in that location. There was actually a fairly local study completed in the Charles River by a PhD student at Northeastern University. They actually assessed floating treatment wetlands in the Charles River and found that about 2 to 7 grams of phosphorus can be removed per meter squared of floating treatment wetland. So that's on the lower end of phosphorus removal. But nonetheless, I think it's a worthwhile project to pilot in Long Pond Marston's Mills. So how will we do this? What we're proposing is to purchase floating media from any floating treatment wetland vendor that we can get a good price at. And working from the shore, there's a semi-public beach on Long Pond. Actually, you can drive down to it with this type of stuff and plant it right there on the shoreline. We are proposing to plant with native plants. Here at the bottom are some of the types of plants we're proposing to work with. We have pickerel weed, sweet flag, marshmallow, blue vervain, maybe mountain holly. It really depends. And then common rush are some of the types of plants that we're proposing. Once we have our wetland planted, like the picture on the right here, we would then put herbivory fencing in around the plants. That's actually necessary just to keep the birds or ducks from mounting the wetland and making homes or potentially predating on the vegetation that we plant. It just gives the plants an opportunity to grow in a little fuller before removing that fencing. And so using a boat, we just tow it out to the study area on the pond and then anchor it in place with cinder blocks or similar type anchoring system. For the monitoring at the study area, so we have 2 study areas that we're proposing. We have location 1. These are both in the north end of Long Pond. Location 1 is further north in the pond, kind of in an area where there's like this small peninsula of just natural land that kind of jets out up here. We like this area because it seems like it's really out of the way of the users of the pond. One reason why we are concerned about it, and we've proposed 2 locations, is because this is really exposed to southerly winds, and I have some concerns that this could be stressed by those southerly winds. So we've got a second location that we're going to pilot just to have a feel for how well the anchoring system works in the pond. That second location is just over here. There's a slight cove created in this northern end, and it's protected by some land that jets out over here. Nonetheless, these are both pretty shallow locations. I think this location 1 is about 4 feet deep and location 2 is roughly 7 feet deep. We like that because then the roots can hang down and interact with the water column without resting on the bottom. So then what we're proposing is to deploy these next spring of 2024, and then evaluate the phosphorus content and biomass of the plants that are initially put on the floating treatment wetlands. And then at the end of growing season 1, we would take subsamples of those plants and evaluate phosphorus content in those subsamples. We'd overwinter them in the pond, either in this location or find a more protected location for them. And then in the spring of 2025, make sure they're back in place and allow them to continue growing out through 2025. At the end of 2025, we would then bring those floating treatment wetlands in, harvest the plants, and take subsamples to determine what the total mass of phosphorus removed by these floating treatment wetlands is through the 2-year study period. Just to give you an idea of what these locations look like on the pond, I did take some pictures out here. So this is location 1. If you're looking north on the pond, this is that peninsula of just vegetated area that juts out. So this would be roughly where location 1 is located, deploying roughly 275 square feet of wetlands, or 7 modules that are sized at roughly 6.5 by 7 feet in width and length. And then location 2, in that little alcove, would be kind of in this area, this open water area, roughly 185 square feet of floating treatment wetlands, or 4 modules of 6.5 feet by 7 feet would be deployed in this area. And so with that, happy to open it up for some discussion and take any questions at this time.
Thanks, Amber. Typically, we have a 3 years for the order conditions. So if I keep it at 3 years, and then if you're doing it in 2 years, you're done. You can also close the file as well.
Yeah, I'm fine if you guys are willing to permit it as a 3-year order of conditions. I know, I think in the NOI narrative, I mentioned it could be permitted as a test pilot project if you preferred that, but then I need to come back after 1 year for another extension on the project. So
to myself, Darcy, is a 3 years okay with you?
Yeah, that would be better. It's our standard order. It's in it. So.
Right. Because I think looking through your environmental monitoring, you need at least 2 years. And this is a good pilot testing in terms of the phosphorus removal. I heard about this process 3 years ago. We called it floating island at that time. And it's doing the similar things, using the planting updates to remove the nutrients for phosphorus and nitrogen as well. So, I think it's worthwhile for us to do this pilot testing and find out how much we can remove in terms of the phosphorus. The only other way that I know of is chemical precipitation. So, but you don't want to do it in the, in the pond to do that stuff. So,
yeah.
Questions, Louise?
So if you're, let's see, if you assume that you're going to get the maximum bang for your buck, 1.8 kilograms per 100 square feet of floating island, and the number of modules that you are putting out there, do you think that you're going to will you see a difference in the pond, the phosphorus level of the pond, or do you need more?
Actually, if we were to have the maximum amount of removal that I've seen and proposed in literature, I think it would only take 300 square feet of floating treatment wetlands to remove the amount of phosphorus we're proposing to remove, or we would want to remove from Long Pond, which is roughly 7 kilograms of phosphorus that we would like to remove from that pond to lower the phosphorus concentration to a level that would be more protective of, not having cyanobacteria blooms.
So you may really see, ideally a significant change.
Well, I don't think we'll see that maximum amount of removal. Given what they found in the Charles River, I think we'll probably have something more on par with what they were getting. But, I still find it interesting because when we, go through our cyanobacteria monitoring program, there are 3 sites on the pond that are monitored, one at the north end, one at the south end, and then one kind of in the middle. And more often than not, the north end has more scums and generally higher cyanobacteria biomass concentrations than the other sites. I think that's largely contributed to the fact that that's the area of the pond that's receiving the most amount of contribution from the watershed. And so the phosphorus concentration was not directly measured in that north end of the pond as part of the study. It was actually measured more in the middle and the south end where we have the deepest basins. But there was a significant difference in the total phosphorus concentration of those 2 basins, where the middle basin had a higher phosphorus concentration than the southern basin. So by deploying the wetlands even further north, I'm thinking there's probably sufficient total phosphorus concentration in that water that the plants are going to be most effective up there at absorbing the phosphorus. And if we can, maybe even start to move the needle up there in terms of the amount of phosphorus available, maybe we'll improve the conditions up there, which subsequently might improve the conditions further in the south in the pond.
Wow, that's really exciting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, Amber, pretty cool pilot you've got here. A couple questions. In the study that was done with respect to sources of phosphorus, was there any sediment water exchanges looking at phosphorus recycling within Long Pond?
Yes, that was a component of the study, and thank you for bringing it up. I should have mentioned it before. We evaluated the sediments by taking, or the consultant evaluated the sediments by taking sediment cores, and they bring them back to their lab, and they incubate them for several months, usually about 3 months. They initially start with an aerobic incubation, so the water column is maintained at well oxygenated levels, and they measure the flux of phosphorus coming in or out of those sediments. In the study, which is reported in the report, under aerobic conditions, the sediments were absorbing phosphorus. And then if you turned off the oxygen and let the sediments go in, the water column go anoxic, the sediments started releasing lots of phosphorus into the water column. But through the study and the monitoring that was conducted in the pond, they didn't find a significant amount of low oxygen in Long Pond. So in other words, Long Pond is well oxygenated throughout the year, meaning that the sediments aren't a large source of phosphorus coming back into the water column. So it's not something to manage for Long Pond.
Okay, well, I will mention, given this is sort of my background, that if you're getting in the North Bay, shallow water, scum formation at the top, that cuts off light. And while you are going to have probably supersaturated oxygen concentrations because near the surface of all this algae, nighttime respiration of the algae and the sediments have the potential for then a diurnal release of phosphorus. And I doubt very much if that was looked at, because it's some nuanced relationship of phosphorus activity relating to diel oxygen concentration in water level. Anyway, good work that you did on that. Second question here with this, and this goes back maybe 30 years of my experience down in the Chesapeake in managing highly eutrophic cow ponds. First of all, having living biomass is aesthetically beautiful. Floating out there will provide great habitat. Even if you get the fences up, insects are going to love it. And so that's going to be great, both aquatic insects and terrestrial that might have aquatic larvae. But what they did down in Maryland for a really cheap farmer solution to these, highly eutrophic ponds, they're much smaller than Long Pond, is they were throwing bales of hay in it. Now, what that does is you're throwing in a big chunk of high carbon-based organic matter. The bacteria that colonize that are sucking up nitrogen and phosphorus from the water in their metabolism of that high carbon straw. You harvest the straw out of the lake before it disintegrates, and you're pulling now a huge biomass of bacteria which have incorporated dissolved phosphorus and dissolved nitrogen from these ponds. So similar to your floating biomass, not nearly as aesthetically pleasing, is this hay bale solution. Again, I have no idea if that's something that would want to be put on a larger scale, but put that in the back of your mind. And I'll see if I can find the reference to that I was familiar with about 30 years ago.
Yeah.
Thanks for your attention.
Thank you. If you can share that, that would be very helpful. I know working with some of the folks around Long Pond, they've brought that up as well. But the proposal of hay bales seemed more of a deploy it and leave it type proposal, and I didn't think leaving it in the pond was a good idea. So
no, you cannot leave it, because after it has absorbed everything and starts to decay, it's just going to release the phosphorus back into the water.
Yep.
You got to remove it.
Yep. Thank you.
Pete, if you find that reference, can you send me one? I'll be interested to look at that. Bill.
Yeah, my first questions had to do with the phosphorus in the sediment. And I guess what you're saying is that because the sediment has got plenty of oxygen, that the sediment is not releasing the phosphorus, and so we don't have to worry about that. Is that correct?
So the water column has lots of oxygen, and therefore the sediments at the very surface will be oxygenated, absorbing phosphorus into them. So yes.
So it's not releasing it. The sediment is not a source.
Right.
So that means then that this algae problem is coming from essentially the phosphorus leaching out of the, if you will, the leach fields that are coming in to the water, and it's like a real-time feeding of the algae.
Yep.
And so you're trying to, I'm guessing, you're trying to suck up that phosphorus that's coming in real time.
Mm-hmm.
How long, I mean, how big of a wetland do you need in order to truly control the phosphorus? Is this big enough to literally, like in 1 year or 2 years? Or is this something where you're going to have to be having a floating island, forever, or you're going to have some gigantic island that's going to curb it?
Yeah, that's the research question. So right now we don't know how well the floating treatment wetland or floating islands will be at removing phosphorus from the water column, and what impact, if any, we'll see in Long Pond's water quality. So that's why the study really focuses on measuring the mass of phosphorus removed by the plants planted on the islands. We could do additional study, like with water sample collection, or even deployment of continuous monitoring equipment around the island to get a better sense of how it's impacting just other processes around it. But because we're starting small, I'm not sure we'll see a large change with the pond being so large, right? But at the end of this 2-year study, the goal is to evaluate what would we have to do to scale this up to have a significant change in Long Pond, and is that something the town is willing to afford and manage, and then from there we can decide if we're going to move forward.
So it could end up being, oh gee, this will work, but it'll take half the half the size of the pond. I mean, that's possible.
Well, I don't think conversion of half the pond surface to wetlands would go over well. But.
I don't know, but that's what you're trying to figure out. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
But this is all part of the pilot study, trying to find out how much phosphorus can be removed by the floating islands, and then decide what is the best options for a certain water body or freshwater pond, because this is a common problem for freshwater ponds that we need to deal with. John?
Yeah, thank you, Tim. 2 points. First, I'm kind of negatively, I think it's a great project. I think obviously we should approve it and move on with it and see what happens. But once again, we're solving we're trying to solve a problem instead of preventing the problem. It's going to continue, the phosphorus is going to continue to leak until we face the septic system issue. So I think this is a good effort, but I think everybody listening has to recognize that we're not attacking the source of the problem. And that's pretty sad. And it's going to be under phase 2 a lot of years before we get there. And that's kind of sad, unless we come up with some options to that, Amber. The only other thing I would ask is, if we approve this, which I think we should, I'd like to put in a condition, Tom, that says after the end of the second year, you will actually not just submit a monitoring report, but please come back to the commission, because if in fact this is found to be an effective treatment, then maybe that's something the commission can do to accelerate that kind of a program throughout the other ponds. So I would put in a condition and requesting everyone to come back after 2 years after it's done and report back to the commission, not just submit a written report, but actually come back and say hello to us.
Yeah.
Certainly.
Good suggestion, John.
Thank you.
Any other comment from the commission or question from the commissioner? Let me go to the public. I see 2 hands up. David?
Yes. Hi. My name is David Abelman. I am the president of the Friends of Long Pond, and we are a nonprofit that we established, I think, 2019, to focus on the quality issues of the water in Long Pond. We have a wide membership within the local community. My wife and I also happen to own the property probably most directly at the north end of Long Pond, and we'll be looking right out at the floating wetlands, and we have plenty of scum to look at over at times like the last couple of weeks. So a couple of things. One, we are fully supportive of this pilot. We've done a lot of work over the last few years on researching alternatives. We can throw out many as possibilities, but the nice one about this pilot is it goes into the no harm, no foul category. Hopefully it works and it shows us something that we can move forward with to address our pond and others throughout the Cape. If it doesn't, we've done no harm, unlike some other alternatives. So I want to thank Amber and all the folks at the town who have helped put this together. Couple of other quick things. One, I think it was I don't remember who, Pete maybe, who raised the issue of barley bales, and we have looked at that as an alternative. It tends to work best, we think, where there's a stream of water coming through and running through the barley, and that's not, for the most part, Long Pond. There are parts where you have that, but and second, we need a lot of bales of barley to address the kind of acreage that we have, and then you would have to take them out every year. So it's certainly worth considering, but this is probably a better approach. And I think that's all the comments I have for now. Again, I appreciate everybody's help, and I look forward to moving forward with this project.
So, David, before you leave, do you have those reference about those?
So I did quite a while ago. I will go back through my notes and my materials and see if I can find anything. I'd be happy to send along. I can send it through Darcy or Amber and get it to you.
Yeah, send it to Darcy. I'm just curious. I want to read it.
Yeah,
I will go back and look for it.
I'm pulling them up right now, Tom.
Thanks.
Even better. He'll send it to you.
Okay. Rick? unmute yourself.
Thank you for all of the help we received from the town. I'm on the opposite end that David is at. I don't overlook a bunch of algae or anything of that nature, but there's been a tremendous amount of effort put into this by Amber and everyone in the town and everyone on Long Pond. So it's really important we get some data from this particular project, because down the road, we also have the state that's going to be issuing requirements for us to upgrade the existing septic systems we have. And we'd like to avoid a situation where we have to update our septic systems for the nitrogen content, and then all of a sudden another year or two later, we have to update them for the phosphorus content. So having data like this from the small project, which he indicated is not harmful, is certainly going to be well worth the time and the effort that we put into it, as well as what we're going to put into it for the next couple of years.
Thank you, Rick. Channel 18, any more public comment on this?
Excuse me, Tom?
Yeah, Stasi.
I do have a point just for our file, and maybe Amber can do this and work with the actual property owner of the beach area. But Amber, I noticed that this references our conservation area 425, and we actually had it signed by the town manager, but it sounds like you're accessing the beach area that's number 89, which is map 29 parcel 9. So probably for our file, you want to get a written statement from the Lake Association group, the owner of that parcel, that you're okay to be deploying the floating wetlands from there. And also, I know you mentioned about overwintering or having to store some over there. I mean, you're welcome to use our conservation area, but I just wasn't sure what you were doing on what parcel.
Yeah, thank you for catching that, Darcy. Just an oversight on my part. Been working closely with David and others who are connected to that Long Pond, beach association area. But then I had filled out the NOI based on where the public land was. So
Amber, Steve Kratt is the president of the association now. He's also a member of our board with Friends of Long Pond. So he'd be the person who can get that to you.
Okay, so yeah. I'll get that and send it over to you, Darcy.
Thanks. Yeah, and just let them know if you need to store anything there, just so they're aware of it,
sure.
Over winter or whatever. And we'll put it in the file. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Darcy. Could I have a motions to approve this project as submitted, subject to the annual report, and then come back at the end of the pilot testing, come back to the commission and present your results?
Sounds good.
Anyone?
So moved, Tom.
Second.
Roll call.
Abadili.
Aye.
Foster.
Aye.
Gilmore, aye. Hearn.
Aye.
Lee.
Aye.
Tangney.
Aye.
Nampu.
Aye.
That's unanimous.
Amber, for me speaking, thank you very much for all you do for the town and to help conservation. Well done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Yep. The last NOI is Gloria Gilbert, proposed house renovations, including a new deck and landing at 190 Palm Street, West Barnstable, as shown on the assessors map 196 parcel 022-002. Dan.
Good evening, Chairman Lee, members of the commission, or late afternoon, as it were. With me is Gloria Gilbert, who is the longtime resident. Her family's been on the property for 40 or so years. This is a very simple project, I think. You'll find it's a very low impact site. If you look at the photographs, let me share my screen. You're looking at a house, a very small cottagey style house, which was built in 1950 prior to the Wetlands Protection Act. The family owns the other dwelling here, so the driveway meanders in across that property and then comes back to us. And it's out on the point of Garrett's Pond, but kayaking around Garrett's Pond, you'd hardly know it's there. All the sweet pepper bush and everything is grown up in front, and the owner maintains a very natural area. For instance, the lawn is more like a little bit of moss than a lawn. It's a very low impactful structure, not grandiose, but just meshes in very nicely with the natural environment. And as the owner gets older, we're looking at these stone steps that go on the west side, and they're very irregular. And she does go down and paddleboard and kayak a bit. And if there's ice on them at all, it's just a hazard. So the project is very simple to remove all this decking and patio here and in place, put a modest deck and then a landing and then returning down so we can bypass those kind of irregular and slippery rocks. They do serve the purpose of kind of stabilizing the bank there, so we're not going to touch them. We're just going to leave them there. We're also removing a deck over here. It was requested that we clarify the plan, and I apologize. The original one wasn't particularly clear because the font was so light. Then when you scanned it, it got so light you could barely see it. But there was patio decking and some rocks that are being removed here as well as that deck. So it's 171 square foot being removed. We're getting rid of a chimney over here, which is 10 square foot. And the existing deck here, not counting the area, which is, in other words, we're not double counting because there's some hardscape here and here that'll remain. That's a net of 30 square foot of removal. And so net 0 to 50, it's going down by 85 square foot, which is favorable in your eyes generally. And then only 21 square foot going up, mostly in the 50. Outside of the 50 here for a little landing and steps to get up into this very modest little cottage. So it's a small project. The owner is very cognizant. She's a longtime conservationalist and very cognizant of not polluting the pond with excess nitrogen or phosphorus to her ability. A new septic upgrade that pushed the leaching well outside of 100. You might have seen the disturbed dirt from that. That was approved through the proper channels. And they're just wrapping that up. So modest removal of some materials here, replacement with a small deck, and not too much else. We established a work limit line around the area to protect the wetland, and we'll pull that up when we're done, and it'll go back to being just a nice low-impact cottagey home. 1 or 2 bedrooms is all that's ever been in here, and that's what's going to remain. Be glad to answer any questions if you have them.
The drawing that you're showing on the screen right now is revised and submitted this afternoon, and this is dated July 18th, today's date.
That's accurate, yeah.
Questions from the commissioner? I didn't see any hands. 10:18, any public comment on this?
Seeing none.
Could I have a motion to approve this project as submitted?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Sampu.
Aye.
Hagney.
Aye.
Lee.
Aye.
Byrne.
Aye.
Gilmore, aye. Foster.
Aye.
Abadili.
Aye.
That's unanimous.
Thank
Really
you.
Appreciate your time. Thank you.
We have 2 continuants. The first one is Stephen Kilman. His Highness Club, Inc., to increase the base elevations of existing 6 tennis courts, install underground drain infiltration area under tennis courts, install 4 new pickleball courts in the existing gravel parking lot, install new Title V septic system, and install new parking lot at 2 Irving Avenue, Hyannisport, as shown on the Assessors Map 266, parcel 031. And this is from a continuance from July the 11th, waiting for the DEP number. And so far, we have not received any DEP number. So the applicant has requested for a second continuance to July the 25th, waiting for the DEP number. Could I have a motion to continuance these applications to July 25th, solely for the DEP number?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Roll call.
Abadili.
Aye.
Foster.
Aye.
Byrne.
Aye.
Sampu.
Aye.
Hagney.
Aye.
Lee.
Aye.
Gilmore, aye. That's unanimous.
Thank you. The second continuance is Jeff Ingram, Penquistic Cove LLC, constructions of a new single-family homes, including mitigation planting for work within the 100-foot buffer zone at 98 Penquistic Cove Circle, contoured as shown on the Census Map 005, parcel 006. This is a continuance from July the 11th. The quorum is everyone except John and Angela. Sean.
Excuse me, Tom. With that, I believe that's the end of the meeting, the last item on the agenda. So I'll just be leaving the meeting now since I'm not part of the quorum.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Sean.
Good evening.
Hi.
How are you?
Not bad.
Good. I'll just share my screen real quick.
Okay.
So as just a reminder, last we met, we had a nice discussion about this proposed project, and we went back to address a couple of the comments the various commissioners made. One was to add some dimension lines to better express the offset dimensions from the resource area. So we did that, and you can see that on the screen here. We have 65 feet to the porch and about 76 feet to the house, and then 50 feet to the wall. So those are at the closest for the project. Now, those are the result of some of the other comments that came back, principally about, I don't know if you recall, but our wall for our patio extended a little bit into the 0 to 50. And the commission asked to see if we could go back and figure out a way to get it outside. So what we did is we shifted the entire complex a couple feet to the northwest, and then changed the orientation of the wall. And what you'll notice principally is we reoriented the stairs to go along the face of the wall rather than going out straight towards the resource area. So all of that netted us with a project that's the entire building and the entire wall structure is outside of the 0 to 50. And then the last change was one of the commissioners asked for us to sort of look at our proposed pathway that was leading from the pavilion down to the sort of the boardwalk structure. And what we're able to do is pull about 30 to 40 feet eliminate about 30 to 40 feet of that pathway. And most of that was within the 0 to 50. That was in this area here. You know, this used to extend down and wrap back. We basically eliminated all that and instead just went straight towards the boardwalk. None of our mitigation changed. I mean, we changed the sort of in response to the changes to the walkways and things like that. The planting palette sort of readjusted itself around the site. So it's about the same extensive plant material, slightly bigger square footage. So we actually net out less impact and more mitigation. So our numbers are better than even originally proposed. And I think that addresses all of the issues that the commission asked for last time.
Thank you, Sean. The revised plans on this date is the June 20th. So keep that in mind. So thank you for doing that, pulling the building outside of the 50 and reduce the footprint. Questions from the commissioner? No one?
I would just say thank you. I'm glad that I'm glad those changes were made. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you too, because when I brought it up with the architect, everybody seemed to like this stairway alignment better. So it's a win-win for everybody.
Yes, thank you for doing that. Channel 18, any public comment on this?
Seeing none.
Could I have a motion to approve this project with the revised plan date June 20th and subject to the annual report for 3 years?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Foster.
Aye.
Gilmore, aye. Hearn.
Aye.
Lee.
Aye.
Sampu.
Aye.
That's unanimous.
Thank you. Good luck.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Our next hearing is at 6:30 on July 25th. Could I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Foster.
Aye.
Gilmore, aye. Hearn.
Aye.
Lee.
Aye.
Kennedy.
Aye.
Sam Koo.
Aye.
That's unanimous, and we are adjourned at 5:14.